Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome you once again to the airwaves of Salam Media, the various platforms of Salam Media, as we welcome our listeners, our viewers to Wednesday nights with myself, Inayet Wadee. And once again, we unpack issues that impact on us and across the entire world. And the biggest talking point coming out of the Muslim world in the last few days has been the result of the elections that had taken place in Turkey. And once again, Rajab Erdogan re-elected for his third term in Turkey. And this is what we are going to do tonight, to unpack the recent Turkish elections, the results. What does it actually mean for Turkey? What does it mean for the world? What does it even mean for the Muslim world? And we have assembled quite an esteemed panel this evening. We've got Yusuf, Erim, editor-at-large for TRT World. And we also have got Hakan, Camuz, director of international law at Stoke White, with us this evening. And out in Turkey, I see Yusuf Erim up on the screen. Brother Yusuf, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Alaikum salam. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to sit down and talk about the next 5 years.
Yes, no, wonderful, in fact, and also to Brother Hakan Camuz, wonderful to see you again. It's been a while, but great that you're able to join us.
You promised me biltongs. I'm expecting them. How are you?
Well, I've got a whole pack of biltong here at home. You just tell me what flavor you want. I'll get that over to you.
Spicy. I'm a Turk. Spicy.
Oh, okay. Brilliant. Not a problem. Well, let's start off, obviously, looking at Brother Yusuf out in Turkey. And clearly, it's been the last few days have been very, very interesting. But just in terms of the outcome, we know that it was quite a closely contested election. But the third term for Erdogan as the president of Turkey, what does it actually mean for the Turkish people?
Well, first of all, it was a very hard-fought election period. It was a very tough campaign for both sides, and I definitely congratulate all political parties for taking part in such an important election. Everyone was trying their best to lead Turkey forward, so I think that's very important to congratulate everyone first. But the final result, undisputed, and despite it being about 4 to 5 points, I would still say about 2 million vote margin, a comfortable, decisive, legitimate, fully accepted result. Recep Tayyip Erdogan again being elected as the Turkish president. Now, when we look up to the process leading into elections, we had an earthquake February 6th, the earthquake recovery period, coming out of a global pandemic, a war in Ukraine, high inflation, many challenges against the Turkish president. On the other side of the opposition, you had a 6-party coalition, a very wide coalition. So everyone was asking the question, is this the election that the undefeated Erdogan is going to lose? But the answer was no. He is still the most popular politician in all of Turkey. And despite all these challenges, the Turkish voters and the more than 60 million registered Turkish voters have given him the vote of confidence to lead the country 5 more years. So I think one of the most important things when we look at the election data, what does this tell us? It tells us that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is still very popular in the heartland, in Anatolia, that he resonates in many of the rural centers. It shows that he is still very powerful in the big cities as well, in the urban centers as well. When we look at the data, breakdown of the data, it shows that his alliance between the conservative AK Party and the nationalist MHP and junior partners as well is the #1 coalition, very handily and very comfortably taking a majority in parliament. We also see some interesting sub-data as well. One of them I think was very interesting was the record high nationalist vote inside of Turkey. When we look at the alliance partner of Erdogan, the MHP getting over 10%. When we look at the E-Party, the coalition partner of the opposition, getting 10%. When we look at the Ata Alliance, another nationalist alliance, when we look at BBP, all these parties together signal that there is a 25% block of a nationalist vote inside of the country. I think this is very important. This is a record high. This is a phenomenon, and it should be read very well by all politicians and all bureaucrats going forward as well. So that's just as important as the election results. But we have 5 more years. I don't want to talk too much and cover everything because I'm sure Mr. Hakan wants to cover much too. So I want to hand the floor off to him.
No,
Yes,
Yusuf, it's actually good to listen to someone else. It's like it kind of gives you a boost again because we're all happy. Of course, Mr. Erdogan winning this election, brilliant news. Inayet, please
Yes,
do say something.
Yes, Mr. Hakan, I know you've got limited time with us, so we'd like to maximize on your presence on the show tonight, but also looking at what a pivotal moment this has been for the country, both for the people, but also for the wider world, because this is extremely important, looking at Turkey, the history of Turkey, the role that Turkey has played both in the Muslim world, looking at Europe, looking at the world at large. So this victory for Erdogan is a very, very critical moment and also a pivotal moment.
Victor Hugo said, please let me use it. He said, nothing can stand before, no power can stand before idea whose time has come. And I think Erdogan represents that for us. He's a symbol of struggling that we've actually put up in this country for quite a long time. And looking at his legacy of last 22 years of being in power, it just makes me want to say the man is a political maestro, a genius who knows exactly how his people feels. And every election he's gone into, every referendum, every local election, he won, as Yusuf said, undefeated champion of Turkish politics. And that's because people love him, they find him genuine, and he is genuine. And that's why he gets credit from people all the time, despite all the negative things Yusuf have listed. And I know, guys, we're going to talk about him today, and we're going to all talk about him positive. You know why? Because most of our viewers and listeners out in the world, especially in the English language speaking world, listen to nonsense and propaganda and blackening of his name just because they cannot get him to do whatever they will. They use their tools, like a global media tools, to somehow try to portray him as if he's a dictator or autocratic ruler, or etc., brands that they try to stick on him, which it doesn't, because Turkish people elect him every time he stands before Turkish voters. And that's what makes this man the symbol of our identity. And that's what people do. They identify themselves with him and what he says, not just internally in Turkey, but to the global world, especially to the Muslim Ummah. I mean, the celebrations, you should have seen in videos all around from different Muslim countries. I have friends, and I'm sure Yusuf has friends, and we all have friends, and they're sending videos to each other and literally sharing our moments together as if we all won the election. Why? Because of defiance to the global system that somehow persecutes us, tries to crush our soul, our identity. You should see the rise in Islamophobia, and somebody somehow resisting this and saying against it. When he said the world is bigger than 5, that's a shocking statement that nobody else has said. And he's been saying it for years, and it's the truth. The world is bigger than the 5 countries that actually try to rule the world. And he is a symbol of that. And that's why it is so important globally, and especially for the Ummah, that we have a practicing Muslim leader who stands out and speaks up. And that's why everybody has given him this credit. It's like almost he has the manifest destiny to show the world how good we can be. And he's doing a great job of it. That's my opinion.
Well, certainly, and also I'm glad you actually, made that statement about the world being bigger than 5, and also to bring Yusuf back into the discussion, is to look at Erdogan. He's obviously a man who has a vision, and his vision actually extends far beyond the borders of Turkey. And we've seen it over and over again during his terms of presidency, when he looked at, the importance of mutual respect, but also as a leader to work with any willing nation so that they could resolve the pressing issues that are impacting across the world and that includes the Muslim world.
It definitely does. And when we look at the period of time that we're living in right now, or at least when historians 50 to 100 years from now look at the period of time that we're living in, I think it's very important. It reminds me of the period between World War I, World War II, when the current world order that we are living in was basically shaped. But we are seeing now a new world order being shaped, a multipolar world order being shaped. And I think out of the current world leaders that we have, this class of world leaders that we have for the past 5 years and for the next 5 years, Erdogan is the leading multipolarist of the world. He is the driver of the world towards multipolarity. He may not be the most powerful of the multipolarists. Maybe Xi may be more powerful, the head of China, or maybe Putin may be more powerful. Maybe Modi may command a bigger population. But influence-wise, policy-wise, influence amongst the international community, network of allies-wise, Erdogan is the one that is driving multipolarity quicker than anybody else, being a NATO ally on one side, but also having very good relations with the East on the other side, being able to broker between Ukraine and Russia, being able to have cordial relations with all throughout the Muslim world, very popular throughout the Muslim world, but also being able to sit down at the table at the EU in Brussels or with any European country as well. So I think that his wide appeal, being able to reach out to Africa with his Africa policies under, I think this is very important as well, under Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey has built one of the biggest diplomatic networks on the African continent. In his 20 years in power, Turkish bilateral trade has increased 600% in Africa. He's also visited Africa more than any non-African leader, head of state alive. So it shows the importance that he places on Africa, that he understands it's the future. And it's this influence and it's this wide recognition across the globe that makes him a leading multipolarist. So he's one of those people that after he's gone, his value will be better understood, because he not only shaped Turkey, he will be a very important footnote in history. I very, very much believe this because of his interest in global affairs, because of his understanding of international events, and also because right now he is the elder statesman in the world. He is the elder statesman. When we look at the European continent, with Merkel gone, Europe doesn't have an elder statesman anymore. Erdogan is Europe's elder statesman. Erdogan is Asia's elder statesman. And in the international community, there is no statesman from a democratic, free and fair electoral process that has been around as long as he has. And he is the elder statesman of the international community. So I think his role, beyond being the Turkish president, is tremendously important. And I hope 5 years from now, when he retires from Turkish politics, I would really like to see him make a bid for the Secretary General of the United Nations. I think that would be a role that would be tremendously suitable for him.
Well, certainly. And also, Hakan, looking at Erdogan, who's basically survived a coup attempt, and earlier on, Yusuf spoke about the earthquake and the economic problems that Turkey had actually endured. But he's come through all of this, and by subscribing and by holding on to a value system, which he holds very, very dear. And that value system is about fairness, it is about justice, it is about peace, it is about equality. And we've seen even in the build-up to the elections, we've seen Islamophobic sentiment within Turkey, within the opposition in Turkey. But through all of this, at the end of the day, he is still looking for unity. I mean, he is a compassionate person, and also looking at just, what a great personality he is in his own right, to be able to be elected for the third time, and for the people of Turkey to put their faith and to put their faith in him.
Kind of adding on to what you said, and kind of adds on to what I've said earlier. It draws his values from the faith. He is a man of a book. He recites Quran beautifully, if I may say personally. He's in English language, what we say he's a practicing Muslim. So he is properly practicing Muslim in every sense. And I believe that he does draw his values from the faith he believes in, which is Islam, of course, and he acts upon it. And yes, you're right. He tries to unite people, but unfortunately, most of the time it falls onto deaf ears. The kind of enmity people carry against him, which was supported by from outside forces, if you like, it's gone on for quite a long time. But he is the leader that most of the Turkish people, as you can see, that voted for him, actually look up to him for those values as well, because he literally lives it. That's why I was saying to you earlier, he is a genuine man, genuine leader, and that's why people somehow identify themselves with him. That's how they actually see him as. And so, coming through all this difficult period in the past, not everything is very rosy. Of course, there's a lot of problems in the economy at the moment. The earthquake zone, as Yusuf mentioned earlier, needs to be rebuilt. This is like something very important that we have to deal with. A lot of reconstruction. Tens of thousands of people have died. Hundreds of thousands are homeless. It needs to be immediately dealt with. But that's what exactly he said. The first victory speech after it was confirmed, he said, first thing we're going to tackle is the economy. And then the priority for us is to help our brothers and sisters in the earthquake zone to get their life back up again. And he knows what the country needs. And he then calls for the unity. This is exactly who he has been throughout every time he's gone into election. He actually called for it. But unfortunately, as Yusuf was talking about how the world is changing, if you realize, I mean, the numbers he's given, 25% of nationalist vote was kind of unheard of before. And it's the classic thing that you see where there's a lot of migration and the nationalism arises and stuff. This is quite a symptom that we all see everywhere else. So the nationalism, identity politics, kind of right-wing politics is on the rise in Turkey. You see evidence of it in some of the languages used throughout the campaigns in Turkey, which was really not usual. We've seen political campaigns, elections in the past before, but never this sharp, never this hateful and discriminatory like it before. This is the first time I've actually personally witnessed such an anger and hatred. And even now, the election is gone. Erdogan won, clear victory, majority in the parliament. Still, opposition supporters, let's say most, still use the same language in social media, still use the same language in their communications. It's not gone away. And identity politics, which is what I want to draw your attention to, if you realize, is on the rise around the world, not just in Turkey. But I kind of saw the glimpse of it in this election. That this is something we need to really watch out. This will mean that Islamophobia will be on the rise, discrimination, racism, fascism. And I know these are kind of big words, but it's actually there. Let's just face it. Like I'll be honest with you, I was surprised. I've been politically commenting on TV for quite a long time, and I don't know how to say this, but in Turkey, for the first time, I actually saw a glimpse of hatred, that kind of fascist tone in speeches and what people have said throughout the campaign, which was really sad for me. So it's only natural for him to call for people to unite and say, come on, we all won this election and we're all going to work together. And I hope that his calls for unity and reconciliation will be answered.
Well, definitely. And also to bring Yusuf back into the discussion. Now, we've seen a lot of propaganda in the build-up to the election. Yusuf, are you able to hear me? I think Yusuf seems to be battling, but maybe Hakan, we can just continue on the propaganda in the build-up to the election, and particularly when one looks at mainstream media, when one looks at the press, and even with the election results being announced, and the world media is talking about a divided Turkish nation as a result of this, the outcome of the election.
I don't know why I don't want to give you a name, but I was on a TV program live yesterday, broadcasting in US. The tone of the language is, oh, well, people have voted to remove him from the power. I'm like, no, this was an election. In election, there's always the incumbent, and then there's the challenger. And this is, it just, you look at it within the context of an election. Why is there hateful language? Oh, we're going to remove him. We were talking about this. The reason why, of course, is that this is not new. Inayet, this is something we have to kind of, call spade a spade. Turkish society is not a homogenic society. Turkish society is made up of pockets of people. You have the Islamists, you have secularists, you have atheists, you have Kurds, you have other ethnic origins, and there's so many different kind of bunch of people here in this country, in Turkey. Now, we're not a homogeneous society in many aspects, and political ideology is quite divided. And so, as soon as an opportunity somehow came about, people have kind of really used harsh language. Media, social media especially, a lot of false allegations, false information about, he's not going to do the election, he's going to cancel the election, he's going to attack Syria, he's going to, I don't know, so many stuff that they actually said about him. All of that turned out to be fake, and everyone's forgotten about it as if it didn't exist. But that kind of language creates what? Hatred. That kind of language creates, unfortunately, enmity to each other. And it's really difficult once you pass that threshold to go back and somehow mend those broken ties that we have as a society. And it's the reason why it's so important for him to say, even if he couldn't somehow get it implemented to unite people, to say, to pursue it, is something he knows that he needs to chase. I hope it doesn't get any worse than this, but I'm kind of fearful, I'll be honest with you. Not just in Turkey, though. Around the world, we have, if you realize, that identity politics is on the rise, and it's not going back. Look at America. I mean, look at languages used in even the British politics. You have a Pakistani origin first minister in Scotland, an Indian origin prime minister in UK. My God, you should see some of the languages used in UK. Do you see how people are somehow all of a sudden discovering where they belong to and become very firm in their posture when it comes to their political ideology? Same as what we have witnessed in this election campaign in Turkey.
Yes, I'm not too sure if Yusuf is back with us. I know he's been trying to reconnect, but we will still continue with you, Hakan. But also, I think, apart from this whole divisive reporting that comes through from the mainstream media, we'll find that also, I think Yusuf is on, and I'm not too sure whether he's on audio. He's muted. Yusuf, can you hear me? If you could just unmute your mic, please. Okay, I think he seems to be battling. But despite, this whole rhetoric that is repeated by the mainstream media on how divided Turkey is, as you mentioned, looking at the Muslim world, looking at issues that impact on the Muslim world and have been impacting on the Muslim world for a very, very long time. And what we've seen with Erdogan is he's been at the forefront to the extent that we've even seen Palestinians in Jordan wrapping themselves up with Turkish flags around their shoulders. We've seen this happen in Tunisia. We've seen it happen in many, many parts around the world. And we are at a crossroads as a Muslim world, as a Muslim ummah, where we are looking for leadership. We are looking at credible leadership to lead the Muslim world. We've seen what has happened in Pakistan with Imran Khan, obviously very, very popular. And I mean, tomorrow, if Pakistan has elections, I'm sure Imran Khan and his PTI party will win hands down. But those elections are being prevented. We've seen what has happened even with someone like Mohammed Morsi in Egypt. After he had won the election and then he was subsequently taken out. So the strong leadership, and this is what Erdogan does. He represents that strength in leadership that the Muslim world is actually looking for.
So David Hurst, I think, yes, David Hurst, journalist in UK. He writes for Middle East, one of the website news agencies. Anyway, I watched his video. He had a 4-minute video in which he's talking about Erdogan, Western journalist. He said, the Western world and obviously their media outlets don't have any problem working with dictators and autocrats and leaders who murder their own citizens, etc. They have no morality about it, he said. They're not looking into this as if somehow they are the representative of some moral values, and therefore they will never do anything because they sell arms to them, they do trade with them, and they talk to them, and they invite them. And you and I could go through so many names of such leaders that right now ruling some of the countries that we all know. So the Western leadership or Western intelligentsia, let's say, they don't have a problem working with these people as long as it suits them, suits their pockets, because these people believe in nothing else. Capitalism is their religion. They are nothing but a capitalist. And so they rule, everything they do is based on this set of values. And because of this, they are going around in a behavior that is quite hypocritical and double standards. So David Hurst actually said in that piece that they don't have a problem working with these kind of people. They have a problem with Erdogan because Erdogan doesn't do what they tell him to do. He does things for Turkey and for Muslims. And so they don't like this. And so what do? They turn into everything they have at their disposal to use this opportunity to somehow turn him into some kind of a evil man that the world should see him as. But in reality, he is the leader, came to power through democratic means that they propagated and believe in. They say they believe in, right? So he comes into power and he runs the country. Every time there's an election, he goes into election. But this is not enough. Why? Because he's not complying, if you like. And so what do? You create a figure that somehow represent him as an evil dictator, autocratic leader, etc., lies, which is what they come up with all the time. And so this kind of language that they use is exposed by their own people because it is so obvious that the double standard they apply to the chosen. For example, Erdogan, for example, outside the EU, right? We're not members of EU, etc., etc. So they turn Erdogan into some kind of a hate figure by using their tools like all this media they have, especially in the Western world. Viktor Orban is a leader of a country that is full member of EU. Viktor Orban does not comply to most of the stuff that they want him to do. And what are they turning him into? This is an EU member country leader, right? Oh, he's a bad guy too, because he's not listening to us. So there's no criteria for these people. If you are basically towing the line, you're fine. If you're not towing the line, you are evil, you're bad, you're a dictator, you're a blah, blah, blah nonsense. And this is why I love these kind of programs where we actually tell our brothers and sisters who listen to us to say, don't listen to the nonsense. You know, be critical. Who is giving you the news? What are they saying to you? Do you have the information that what they're saying is correct? No. I mean, they, like I said to you previously, they've actually tried to portray him as if somebody who's going to somehow steal this election or prevent it from happening, or he wasn't going to do this and that. He implemented everything that needed to be implemented in the most democratic way that they should be really proud of. But because of the hypocrisy in which they live, they can't accept it. And so we need to understand this and wake up to the fact that these people and their media outlets and their spokespersonnel and all those things that they use to somehow impose their version of the story needs to be looked at critically and rejected when found to be lies. Most of them are. I live in Turkey. I have not seen this man to be a dictator. And I tell you what, 47 whatever odd percent people who did not vote for him, they're just still living their life, running their shops, saying whatever they want to say on their social media accounts, doing their businesses, going about living their lives with their families. You know, nobody's restricted to do whatever they want. They still drink their alcohol. They still dress exactly how they want to dress. Where is the dictator? Where is the oppressor? It's just lies, constant, utter lies, which is what the Turkish people have rejected in this election, once and for all.
Well, Hakan, I believe you've got to leave us. Or do you still have time, or do you have to go?
I do have to go. I'm in Ankara at the moment. Yusuf is in Istanbul. I'm in Ankara. And right now, guys, Ankara is bubbling with the excitement. Who's going to be this minister? Who's going to be that minister? So many meetings, so many. Yusuf, I'm sure, familiar with this. There's a lot of gossips, and Yusuf's going to be that, and Hakan's going to be this, and there's a lot of stuff going on here. It's exciting. Anyway, there's a few meetings that I have to attend, so I'm going to leave you guys a little bit early. But I take pleasure in being part of what you do, Inayet, and your program. And please, let's try and make some time in the future if you need. I'm always here for you. I love you guys. Look after yourselves. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. We love you too as well, for the sake of Allah. Take care. Yes, Yusuf, it's now you and I, and Hakan is gone. And earlier on, I think while you were trying to reconnect, the one issue that I raised with Hakan is to look at the sentiment in Turkey at this point in time, where the Western media is pushing the narrative that this is still a divided Turkey. Is that evident after the election results?
No, I mean, when we look at past elections and when we look at this election now, with the opposition forming a 6-person party, and the main point of conformity or uniformity amongst that opposition being to remove Erdogan, this election unfortunately became a referendum on Erdogan, because when you look at the opposition, you have a left-wing party, you have a right-wing nationalist party, you have a right-wing, well, 2 right-wing conservative parties. From the outside, you have a party that's predominantly dominated by Kurdish politicians as well, supporting them. So really, on paper, these are not political ideologies that normally come together. So what brought them together was Erdogan. So that's why I say, unfortunately, this election became a referendum on Erdogan. Did it divide the country a little? I think for a brief period of time, yes, it has divided the country. But I think that's a temporary situation. It's going to pass. At the end of the day, everyone lives here. Erdogan's been in power for 21 years. It's not like somebody that they don't know is coming. It's someone that everybody knows. Everybody knows very, very well that is continuing to remain in power. So I don't view that momentary or that division that was sown for the last 2 months. I'll add a month ahead for campaigning as well, as something that's going to be sticking. Now, I caught the end of your conversation with Hakan. It seems that you guys were talking about how fair elections are. Are they free? Are they fair? Because that's been generally one of the themes. One of the things I read a lot was this election was Erdogan versus democracy. And unfortunately, to be able to reduce democracy down to a single outcome, I think that's a very, very sad understanding of what democracy is. When we look at the free part of free and fair, there's no discussion about the elections being free in Turkey. The voting process is very transparent. The vote counting process is very transparent. There is no room for manipulation in this process. No one is disputing the results of this election. When you go to the voting booth, there's members from all political parties there as monitors. They check you in. You go in, you vote, you leave, you sign under your name. They all witness your signature. At the end, when all the ballots are counted at that polling station, a member from each political party, the pro-government and the opposition, they all sign underneath how many votes there are. So there is a signature-based record of how many votes there are. Then they are counted once again, and it is compared to each. So there is no room for manipulation in this. There's too many eyes from too many different parties. Now let's get to the fair part. Is the election fair? Well, I think the question is, when we go back to 2002, when there was a newly formed political party called AK Party, and they had a young political leader who was in jail named Recep Tayyip Erdogan, however fair it was in 2002 for AK Party and Erdogan is exactly how fair it is today. I don't think that the level that we can gauge fairness has changed at all. So either elections were always fair in Turkey, or they've been always unfair in Turkey. But to come and point the finger now and say, well, the elections are unfair right now, nothing's changed. The elections were the same fair, just as fair as they were in the 1980s when you had the domination of the center-right, just as fair when you had the domination of the left wing, just as fair when you had the domination of a more military-backed political parties as well earlier on in Turkish history. It's always been the same. So you can judge maybe Turkish elections are to be unfair, but to say that it's a product of Erdogan or a product of AK Party, that's absolutely absurd. So they've been as fair as they've always been. And I think one more very important criteria or very important piece of data that I think shows that elections are fair in Turkey. Inside the country, Erdogan got 52%. In Europe, Erdogan got 60%. Now, Europe is generally considered as the member states of the European Union are generally considered the most advanced democracies of the world. That could be debatable, but the general opinion is that EU member states have the most advanced democracy, especially the Scandinavian states, let's say. But Erdogan, throughout Europe, got more votes than Kılıçdaroğlu, and he outperformed his domestic performance. So that creates the question, is the conditions in Europe unfair? Does the Turkish government have such an incredible power that they're impacting citizens on European soil? Obviously not. That's absurd. Maybe the answer is so much more simple that the Turkish president is just a very, very popular man. His citizens like him, and they want him to continue to lead this country the next 5 years. And that's the simplest answer. And that's the correct answer. So, again, are elections fair? I think they're fair. They're as fair as they've always been. If they're not, why is Erdogan outperforming in Europe? Why is Erdogan outperforming beyond Turkey's borders, where the conditions are not in his control?
Yes, and also I think what is interesting in your analysis, where you speak about the within the opposition ranks, the right-wing parties, and when we look at the world, and when one looks at the political dynamics that have been unfolding in the world, they have been largely dominated by right-wing element, by parties, by politicians, by people holding right-wing values, populist, nationalist values, and we've seen it right across the world. We see it in India, we see it in France, we've seen it in Brazil, which has now changed as well, but many parts around the world. But to try and impose a right-wing ideology on a nation like Turkey, and we know, the Turks, very, very proud people coming from a very, very rich history. And you mentioned, you analyzed it so well, the different types of governments that Turkey has had in the past prior to 2002. Whether it was the military, whether it was the right wing. But again, looking at a country like Turkey, a world leader in the Muslim world with the Khilafah, and also looking at how the Muslim world sees Erdogan, and they are looking for someone to lead the Muslim world. And I'm sure when one ticks all the boxes, to a large extent, Erdogan would be ticking all those boxes that the world is looking for, or the Muslim world is looking for.
Well, first of all, when we talk about right wing, especially inside of Turkey, when we use the word nationalism, I think Turkish nationalism is a little more different than European nationalism. European nationalism being a little more ethnocentric. I think Turkey's Ottoman history and its very diverse culture and very diverse ethnicity throughout the Ottoman Empire makes Turkish nationalism much more embracing. I think Turkish nationalism, or the understanding of being a Turk or being accepted by Turkish nationalists, is a much broader brushstroke than, say, for example, a French nationalist, or say, for example, a Spanish nationalist, or nationalism in Germany. I think the ideology is a little different. For example, the MHP, the Turkish Nationalist Party, Erdogan's alliance partner, has been very warm towards Syrian refugees. They've worked together with Erdogan on his policy to accept Syrian refugees. So it's not your general nationalism. I think there's spectrums of Turkish nationalism that would more be identifiable as patriotism rather than nationalism. So I just wanted to expand on that word. Now, when we look out at the Muslim world, we're actually enjoying a relatively good period amongst the Muslim world, not the Muslim world and the way it's perceived outside or its bilateral relations or multilateral relations with other countries, but amongst after the Arab Spring, which unfortunately divided much of the Muslim world, created massive fault lines. We're in an era now of convergence, especially in the Middle East and North Africa. We're seeing rapprochements that have started with the Alula summit, the rapprochement between Qatar and the GCC with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and broader beyond the GCC, Egypt. We've seen Turkey also begin a rapprochement with these countries as well. So we've entered a period of convergence, and hopefully this is going to have less competition, more cooperation. That's what I'm hoping in the next 5 to 10 years to come, because the region needs that. I think there's a couple understandings that have been driving this reconciliation throughout the Muslim world, at least the Muslim world as in the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa. I think one of the understanding is that the Americans are shifting their concentration to Asia to counter China more and more. Now, this is not going to happen in one day, but I think that it's a gradual process now that is happening over time. Former U.S. President Donald Trump said this. Current U.S. President Joe Biden has said this. So we can see that this is a bipartisan U.S. state policy now, that this is happening regardless of how quick or how slow it is, that regional countries, especially these regional Muslim countries, need to prepare for a post-American Middle East and post-American North Africa. And the best way to prepare for this is to be able to create regional solutions to regional problems. And the best way to do this is through regional cooperation. So we are seeing a change in understanding where competitors or adversaries over the past 10 years now see it as much more feasible, much more proactive, and much more productive to work together with these countries rather than continue to have a hostile foreign policy or continue to be an adversary. And I think this is going to have a very positive trickle-down impact on the rest of the Muslim world. We've even seen general and historical rivals like Saudi Arabia and Iran, UAE and Iran begin sending some diplomatic messages to each other. So that would create an even bigger cooperation web inside of the Muslim world, where we can see that divided between Sunni and Shia throughout the Muslim world slowly begin to disintegrate. So I think that we're entering what could be, I don't want to sound too optimistic because there's a lot of fault lines that could be triggered, but I think we are entering what could be the beginning of a very prosperous 5, 10, 15, 20 years for the Muslim world. And I think that leaders like Erdogan are very important for this. I think leaders throughout the Middle East, whether it be the Emir of Qatar, whether it be the crown princes in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, whether it be President Sisi in Egypt, whether it be King Abdullah, whether it be throughout North Africa, in Algeria, Libya, the UN recognized government. I think that this is definitely going to be a time of prosperity if this grand convergence can continue.
Well, certainly. And also, I think what is also important to note is to look at Erdogan and to look at Turkey in terms of its relationship with the world powers. One sees Russia, obviously, there is this close relationship, but also looking at China, for example, where China is now trying to shift focus, where it's playing a more diplomatic role on the global stage. We've seen what has happened between Saudi Arabia and Iran in terms of China playing that facilitating role, bringing the two together, and also at the same time looking at it against Western Europe, looking at it against America. And while these global powers, you mentioned China and the United States of America featuring, and also Russia with its involvement in Ukraine. But again, strategically, it's very, very important for Erdogan to align himself to the right people for the benefit, obviously, of Turkey, but also just looking at Turkey and its presence on the global stage.
Well, I want to start with the Turkey-China relationship, because I think that it's very little talked about. Very few people talk about the Turkey-China relationship. And I think that the verdict on the Turkey-China relationship still hasn't been reached yet. How will that relationship look in the next 5 to 10 to 20 years? Will they be competitors? Will they cooperate? Will they be partners, allies, adversaries? I think there's a lot of question marks on how that relationship will develop. But one thing's for sure, when we look at their areas of influence, as Turkey is increasing its influence in Central Asia with the Organization of Turkic States and its Turkic brother nation there, China is also increasing its influence in that region with the Belt and Road Initiative. As Turkey is reconciling with Gulf states and also countries throughout the Middle East, we're seeing China making more and more inroads with investments throughout that region. As Turkey is increasing its influence in Africa, we're seeing China increase its investments and its presence and its footprints in Africa. So as you can see, there's 3 different theaters that Turkish and Chinese influence and relations are colliding. Now, will that collision be a handshake when they meet, or will that collision be adversarial? I think that remains to be seen. Now, until now, we've only seen China exert soft power everywhere. Financial power, economic power, but generally classified as soft power. We haven't seen China really use any type of hard power in any in any of its foreign forays, let's say. Now, I think the most important thing of how Turkey and China will be able to cooperate or compete with each other is what happens when China does use that hard power. How will it use? Where will it use it? I think that will be a very important test to see how Turkey perceives this. Is it threatening? Is it complementary? Is it cooperative? That will be very, very telling. That will be very important. And I think that China, regardless of how powerful it is, it needs partners in the Muslim world. It can't do it by itself. And I think that when you look throughout the Muslim world, you have a couple of very big, powerful countries: Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. So it would need more than one of these countries to work together with it. Most likely a cooperative, a coalition of these countries help it increase inflation. But I think that the relationship between Turkey and China, while it has its flashpoints, such as the Uyghur issue, that will remain a flashpoint, I generally think it'll look a lot like how the Turkey-Russia relationship looks right now. It'll be a blend of cooperation, confrontation, and competition. I think it'll be a mix of those 3. It'll be transactional, but I generally think that they'll find many areas to work with in the future. Now, as for Russia, I think Turkey is going to continue its Russian policy because it's seen a lot of benefits from its Russian policy, and it'll continue that. It'll continue to be able to provide diplomacy between Russia and Ukraine, whether it's the grain corridor deal, the prisoner swap deal, the trilateral meeting amongst foreign ministers. It'll continue not to apply Western sanctions, but it'll also continue to supply Ukraine with weapons, and it'll also continue to enforce a closure of the Turkish Straits to maritime naval vessels as well. So again, it'll be a bend but don't break, push but don't shove type of relationship with Russia. But I think they'll be one level closer now than they were before elections, I think, going forward. So Turkey will continue to be close with Russia. Now, I think the final of the 3 major superpowers, and I can see that we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to wrap this up as quick as possible. The United States. I think the night of after elections, after Erdogan won, Joe Biden, the president of the United States, and also Secretary of State Antony Blinken, both of them sending congratulations to Recep Tayyip Erdogan, being one of the first countries, being the first quarter, not the last quarter, I think sent an olive branch to Erdogan and created an opportunity for increased diplomacy. Now, the Turkish president, he's been in power 21 years. He's a 70-year-old man. He's been doing business a certain way all his political career, with leadership diplomacy. He likes to look at in the face of a leader, handshake, and he likes to make that promise or sign that agreement together face to face. Now, I understand the Americans like to work more on an institutional level, but you're not going to change the habits of a 70-year-old man. So this past 5 years, this lack of coordination, this lack of communication, this lack of dialogue between Biden and Erdogan has unfortunately been costly for the U.S.-Turkey relationship. It hasn't been able to progress. So I'm assuming that these congratulatory messages, American support for the Turkish people during the earthquake recovery period, have improved public opinion and created the opportunity for maybe a Biden visit to Turkey or an Erdogan visit to the United States. And this can create new opportunities. I think Erdogan's very interested in brokering peace in Russia, between Ukraine and Russia. That could create opportunities for the United States. I think Erdogan's interested in trying to sit down and have advanced negotiations with the Greeks on maritime issues in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean. That's something that will be supported by the United States. The NATO issue with Sweden, that'll take, but I think an inevitable end to Sweden's NATO membership will be an approval. So I think that's something that will be positive with the United States. And also Erdogan's desire to keep refugees until it's safe in Syria. This is a positive policy that will go down well in the United States. So I see a lot of areas where there could be initial cooperation that they can build on towards bigger and better things going forward. So I'm not as pessimistic as everyone else. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think the first step needs to be taken by the Americans, because if they extend hand to Erdogan, I'm very comfortable in saying that if they extend their hand to Erdogan, I know that he will shake it.
Well, definitely. And just finally, a leader like Erdogan, obviously, he is a very strong personality, and that actually shows in his leadership style. But also, you are as strong and as powerful as the people that you've surrounded yourself with and the people that work with you. Now, I know all eyes are on the cabinet and who he's going to select for the candidate for his cabinet. Just looking at the people that he's surrounded by, just your thoughts, Yusuf, on those that are close to him. And also, when one looks at future leadership emerging in Turkey after Erdogan.
Well, first of all, I mean, until Saturday night around 10 o'clock when he announces the list of new cabinet members, I think it's only speculation. The only people who know who's going to be on that list is Erdogan and the Almighty Allah. That's it. Nobody else knows who's on that list. He won't tell nobody. So the speculation you hear is only people guessing. But when we look at his previous cabinet, they're tremendously talented people. Foreign Minister, he's been his longest serving foreign minister, tremendously talented. The defense minister, Hulusi Akar, he's been the chief of staff of the Turkish Armed Forces. He's worked closely together with NATO in his past career. He knows the army inside and out. He's been the Turkish defense minister now for 5 years. Tremendously talented gentleman. The director of communications, Fahrettin Altun, he built Turkey's communications apparatus. There was no professional communications apparatus before him, and he built this in 4 to 5 years. Tremendously talented individual as well. Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu, tremendously talented minister. The Chief of Intelligence, Hakan Fidan, he's revolutionized Turkish intelligence. I mean, these successes that they are doing every single day going forward, tremendous as well. The Minister for City Planning and Urbanization and Environment, Mr. Kurum, also very talented as well, doing a great job trying to make Turkey more earthquake resistant going forward. Also working on climate change and the environment as well. And Farid Tunkocha, the health minister, his performance during the pandemic was tremendous as well. And I could just count every minister, but all of these men are very talented, very experienced, but there's also many new politicians awaiting appointment as well. So it's going to be interesting to see who stays, who goes.
Well, it's interesting times, but I'm sure, Erdogan, with the experience that he's had and now that he's in his third term, will obviously make the right decisions. And there's just so much more I think you and I can talk about and unpack. But unfortunately, Yusuf, time has run out. But I do appreciate, we appreciate you taking time out and being part of this broadcast in unpacking the Turkish elections with us this evening. We wish you all the best and please take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks to everybody that's watching.
Yusuf Erim with us this evening on Wednesday night with myself, Inayet Wadee, as we unpacked the recent Turkish elections. And Yusuf Erim is the editor-at-large for TRT World. The time is just headed just past 8, and we still have got another issue to focus on. Dr. Fawzia Siddiqui has landed in the United States of America, and we are going to unpack what her visit actually means and also what she hopes to achieve during a visit with regard to securing the release of her sister, Dr. Afia Siddiqui.